The first piece we're going to talk about is this piece here, this lovely abstract bunny. So I made him in 2024. He's been entered a couple different art competitions and didn't actually win anything, but is still one of my favorite pieces. Let's hop into the theory of how to make him. Okay, so I know a few of y'all are going to complain because I'm using watercolor, not acrylic, and I'm going to be doing it on this little piece of paper, but I just wanted to show y'all the theory behind creating artwork similar to the buddy photo I showed y'all just a few minutes ago. Also, let me know if this angle's awful. I'm trying out something, so we'll see whether or not it works. Anyways, so first off, we're going to look at the shapes of the bunny. So obviously, this bunny is just a circle, right? It's just a massive circle. See? It's just one massive circle. But it's a circle with another circle. One more mini circle right here. And then 2 circles on his head. Now that pretty much looks like a bunny, especially if you add, you know, cute little nose and stuff. And that's really what the first exercise is all about, is breaking this rabbit up into as many, like, as small as pieces as possible. So let me fold this. Okay. That didn't work as well as I thought it was going to. Let's do that. Alright, there we go. So, what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a cute little practice drawing. So I have circle, circle. Doesn't look like a bunny yet, so I need to add another piece. Circle, still not a bunny. Okay, now, defining features. That looks like a bunny. So obviously I would go back in, if this was an illustration, do that, double check, see that that is actually aligned there. So I would fix that, make that rounder. But this is just me practicing the act of breaking it down into itsy bitsy little pieces. So now that I have that done, I can come onto my piece of paper here. Sorry for the nails, I haven't been to the salon in like 3 weeks, so they're pretty bad right now. But I can do that exact same thing. So I'm gonna do small sketch. I know the head is right there. Now if you look at the photo, the cheek sort of just goes along with it. So I'm just gonna sort of do the same thing here. At this point, I don't even really need the photo anymore. I got all I needed from it. Now, why am I drawing so lightly? That is because I'm going over it with watercolor. Now, the original painting is with acrylic, so you could draw as thick as you wanted, but since I'm going over with watercolor, I'm going to want to do really light lines. Now, he has a sort of a poofed out cheek here. I'm going to add that, and then that is my starter sketch. So I'm going to go over this with eraser, because again, I'm not using acrylic. So I can see it, I don't think y'all can, but that's fine. Then we're going with step 2, or really 3 at this point. I'm going to wet him, because this is watercolor. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill him in with the base color that I want. So if you're doing room decor, you can choose colors from your room. I'm basically just going to copy, let me grab my color palette. I'm basically just going to copy the original bunny. I'm going to do this pink here. Once I track down where that is, here it is. gonna do this pink here. And I'm going to fill in shapes. So with watercolor, it's a little trickier, but basically I would just leave like a little line right there to show that this is in fact a different shape than the rest. There's another one right there. And then I would sort of fill in from there. Just to make sure that those parts are very defined. Go back in a bit. Okay. Sorry. So, we got that. Next up, you're going to want a background color. Again, go for colors from your room. I'm going to copy the original and just go with some yellow on the outside. Okay, so we got this. I'm not going to go too deep because my paper's starting to fold up. But after you get this, you have the basic colors, you have all that you need there. We're going to go in and start adding in the splooshes of color. A little bit trickier on watercolor. But with splooshes of color, what I really start with is trying to define the shapes with it further. That should be dry enough. Dry enough, but not enough color on the brush. Roll that, thank you. So I'm still defining shapes, even though I'm using, we're just gonna keep going with the term splooshes of color. A little bit trickier to get rid of something than with acrylic for watercolor, but if I didn't like a color, I would just go back in and paint over it. So you'll notice that I'm sort of doing colors that are similar to one another first, and I'm still staying in sort of the family of that pink. That is somewhat intentional. You can go outside the color of the pink pretty much immediately, but I tend to like to try and use it as an underpainting almost to really define what I want. I'm not going to affect the outside any. That's good enough for what we're doing today. I'm going to let this dry for just 1 minute. I think it's dry enough. We're not going for perfection today. We're sort of just going for something to show the theory of it. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with the slightly more unusual colors. So I can go in with some fluoride orange. I'm still trying to make it swirl in the direction of the parts. Make sure that everything stays nice and divided. Going back in with the original pink. And that's another thing. You can continue to go back and forth in between the two. I'm gonna go in with some gold. Let's see what that does. Barely anything. Actually, if you look at that, that really doesn't do much, so it's not gonna do much on here. About some bright yellow. We can add in some red into the ears. But even as I'm adding color, just notice that I'm still remaining within the shapes, keeping everything nice and defined so that you can still look and see a bunny. Notice I just went ahead and filled in the eye and the nose. That was on purpose. I want to just make sure it remains where I originally put it as we go along. So I'm just continually doing that. The thing about abstraction is that you don't want to try and keep things too serious, too tight. So if something gets exaggerated while you're doing the painting, that's not that big of a deal. Now, obviously, a larger thing would take a lot more time and a lot more diligent color adding, but really the main thing to this style is those small shapes and making the colors stay within the bounds. The second piece we're doing are these little log coasters things that I turned into wall hanging pieces. I'm going to talk about the shading. So first steps first, we just do the basic shapes of everything. So for a mushroom, that's just a semicircle, and then a rectangle for the trunk. I also filled in with a little bit of basic colors just to make that really clear. So how you're going to want to shade to get the same style as the log things, which by the way, whenever you're doing the original technique, you can just add on the extra bits afterwards. For the shading bit, yes, thank you. So what you're going to want to do is on the outside of everything, all the different colors, you're going to want to do the darkest every time it touches another color. And then you're going to want to do the lightest surrounding that part. So that's how I did the shading on these logs, just because I thought it was an interesting and fun way to do it, and I really enjoyed the way it came out looking in paint. It's not the traditional way, it's not really necessarily exactly what you're supposed to do, but I thought it looked relatively cool. So that's really it. Let's go ahead and do it with the other pieces. So we're going to go ahead and do the gem stack. So this one's really easy. We do the basic shapes, which is just a triangle and a rectangle. Then we're going to fill it in with a color. We're doing amethyst, so obviously it's going to be purple. You fill in the entirety of both those shapes, and then we're going to go back over and do our technique where we do the darker on parts of it and the lighter on other parts. So we are going to start with the lighter, and we're going to do it on one side and then wherever it touches another color. And then we're going to go ahead and grab our darker color, and we're going to have that sort of be the outline wherever the two colors meet, so the two different shapes meet. We're going to do that, and then we're going to do it on the outsides. That sort of creates this more three-dimensional shape. For our next piece, we're going to do the owl, and that one's really simple. So the owl is really just two circles and then some triangles. All you're really doing is adding a little bit of pizzazz by doing little swiggle lines and just making it look a little bit more interesting than circle, circle, triangle, triangle. Of course, you got to add on the face. That one's really easy, just two dots and a triangle, and then you get into the shading. We're going to use the exact same shading technique that we used on all of the other examples. This time, though, you're going to want to try and keep all the different colors, even though they're the same, within their bounds so that they look more. I use yellow for the highlights here because that seemed it would show a bit more, especially since the original owl is just white. Then I added blush because it's cute. Alrighty, so with the potion bottle, real quick, make sure that your straight lines are even and then it starts going into a curve at the same point. So I do a darker outline than everything else that's going to go into the shading. Fill in the bottom outline that's outlined in red and the top with blue. You can also overlap the blue a bit, even over the top of the entirety of the red. I just did a little overlap here just for simplicity's sake. Then we're going to go with a darker color, and everywhere that the red touches with a different color, we're just going to outline in some darker red. You'll notice that I left a little bit of space open here. This is like an exception to the rule. I just wanted to add white there instead of dark, so I went ahead and left it alone. So at the top, you're going to see that's what it looks like without it, and then at the top you'll see that I did it with the outline. It's really dealer's choice there. The third and final piece for today's video is this piece. It's unfinished, but I'm just going to show you how I managed to copy the photo down using the grid technique. So, first thing, most important, if you have a picture that is a square, make sure your thing is also a square. You do not want it to be a rectangle and a square because you can't do the grid technique properly. So make sure you have a pretty much square and square. It can be a smaller square and a bigger square, but not a square and a rectangle, square and triangle, whatever. Now you're going to split the image in half, and then in half again, and do the same thing in your same shape. So we're going to split this one in half and in half. If you're doing this in paper, you can measure it, making it super like straight and perfect. I'm not going to do that because I'm just trying to demonstrate how to do this. This is perfect for organic shapes, so you can copy it without having to worry about the item itself. So what you're going to do is in that top corner, you're going to try and copy the exact shape that is in the top corner, not worrying about anything else. So making that, it sort of starts straight and then it goes into a downward curve. We're going to go ahead and do the next section. So as you can see there, it goes straight down, does a little curve, and then goes straight. So I imitate that exactly. If it gets too difficult for you to imitate something, you can then split up that square even more until you have exactly what you need to do it. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next one, which starts straight and then goes into a little bit of a curve. So you imitate that. Then the final one, it goes straight, curve, and then straight again. And then you have a relatively accurate apple. You can also use it to measure where you need to place other things, which there, see, is relatively accurate. You can use it to place other things. So like if I wanted to put a stem down, which I think I'm fixing to do in a minute. Come on, stem. Nope, I'm going to shade. Okay, I forgot what order I went about things. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this all in with red, and then we're going to do a little bit of shading. So you can use this to place items like shading. So you can put that on that grid mark, you know that the shading starts or ends, or it's in the direct middle. It just tells you exactly where everything's going to be put. Okay, now I'm doing the stem. You can see that it sort of starts right before that grid mark. So I went ahead and put that. It's not perfect, but it's relatively close and it's placed in the correct place. Then we're going to move on to some shading. So you can tell by looking at where the highlight is on the grid marks. It starts directly in the middle and then it sort of spreads out inside of block 1, and we can imitate that relatively closely. We can also see where all the shading is. So it's directly in the middle of mark 2. That's really the use of this technique, is having accurate ways to track your organic forms and kind of like a roadmap for you to create it as close as possible.